Why would Iran do something so foolish, though? If you think about it, even working through its agents, whether the Houthi rebels or these other groups, knowing full well we've got an armada already there, we can just wipe them out at a moment's notice if it ever came to that. Why would they risk that wrath? They don't have too many friends in the region supporting them.
Well, two things. One, I think they want to just ratchet it up, and it's going to raise the price of oil, which means they're going to get more money in their coffers for the little bit of oil that they are getting out of their country and being used around the world. But the second thing is, it's very bizarre that they would pull something like this off while Prime Minister Abe is there visiting with the Supreme Leader Khamenei. I mean, it just does not make sense. So there may be a little bit of internal machinations going on within the Iranian government itself between hardliners and others. But what about someone trying to
set them up, Commander? That's what I'm getting at here. I'm not saying that's the case, but if you want to, trigger a battle with Iran, that's a good way to do it.
I think that right now, trying to figure out if we've got a false flag, I don't believe it. I think the Iranians, in fact, are behind this. We probably have the intelligence to back that.
We will go there. In the meantime, we're also following developments from half a world away with the ongoing pressure right now, led by the Secretary of State, to get to the bottom of those tanker attacks. Now, to Rich Etzen at the White House. They seem, Rich, to have fingered Iran. They don't have any doubts about it. What next?
Neil, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says this is the work of Iran. He says intelligence points to that. He says this is all part of Iran's reaction to the United States restoring heavy economic sanctions against them, part of the U.S. withdrawal from that 2015 Iran nuclear agreement. And there, Secretary Pompeo says Iran is lashing out because the regime wants our successful maximum pressure campaign lifted and that no economic sanctions entitle the Islamic Republic of Iran to attack innocent civilians, disrupt global oil markets, and engage in nuclear blackmail. Iran has denied involvement in all of this. The Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif suggested that the attacks were designed to thwart ongoing discussions between the Japanese Prime Minister and the Iranian government. Zarif tweeted, quote, reported attacks on Japan-related tankers occurred while Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was meeting with the Ayatollah Khamenei for extensive and friendly talks. Suspicious doesn't begin to describe what likely transpired this morning. Abe met with the Supreme Leader. The Supreme Leader says that he is rejecting a communication from President Trump because he doesn't consider the president worthy of even exchanging messages. To that, President Trump tweeted, quote, while I very much appreciate Prime Minister Abe going to Iran to meet with the Ayatollah, I personally feel that it is too soon to even think about making a deal. They are not ready, and neither are we. Iran has also threatened to continue producing highly enriched uranium next month if the European governments don't help them circumvent American sanctions. Neil?
All right, Rich, thank you very much, Rich Etzen at the White House. Now, what seems to be fingering the Iranians right now is a very familiar mine that exploded there and the evidence that points to prior such weapons that the Iranians have used. Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon with more on that. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Neil. Well, we've just learned the USS Mason, a U.S. Navy destroyer, is being sent to help the USS Bainbridge, which was involved in rescue efforts earlier today. A senior U.S. defense official confirms that the U.S. Navy saw an unexploded mine attached to the hull of the Panama flagship that was attacked this morning. Officials say mines were involved in both attacks, not torpedoes.
Has deployed many of its resources to perpetuate its revolutionary ideology and malign activities in the region. It should be countered by a strong, unified front.
Japan's prime minister visited Tehran for a high-stakes diplomatic mission and warned about a potential accidental war. Both oil tankers were carrying Japanese petroleum products. One tanker was on fire but did not sink. 44 sailors had to be rescued at sea. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton were here at the Pentagon this morning for a pre-scheduled meeting with the acting defense secretary and chairman of the Joint Chiefs in the secure war planning room known as the tank. The tankers had just left ports in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates en route to Asia. Last month, 4 oil tankers were damaged by mines not far from where today's incident occurred. Today, the distress calls came 8 minutes apart, according to the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. Central Command says USS Bainbridge, a guided missile destroyer, part of the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group, rescued 21 sailors. That aircraft carrier rushed to the region early last month. A amidst rising tensions with Iran. Just days ago, the head of American forces in the region, General Frank McKenzie, warned of an unspecified imminent threat from Iran and its proxies during a trip to the Middle East. Neil?
Jennifer, thank you very, very much. So if Iran is the one behind this, then how do we respond? Former USS Cole Commander Kirk Lippold. Commander, good to have you. What do you think?
Well, good afternoon, Neil. I think that right at this point, we need to get irrefutable proof presented at the UN, make sure the international community understands what has happened, that it in fact is the result of Iranian actions or their proxies, and then we hold them accountable.
So obviously we want to do this in the auspices of the UN. We don't seem, it seems at this point, Commander, to want to do this alone. But what would it ultimately be that we do?
Well, Neil, I would hearken back to the days in the late 1980s when the tanker wars were going on. You had Iran and Iraq at war with each other, and the U.S. took it upon itself, along with the international community, to escort these oil tankers in and out of the Gulf. At that time, we needed proof that Iran, in fact, was mining the waterways there, that they were conducting some of the attacks that were going on. I think we need that same level of proof here, because if we're going to act in a manner that is going to hold the Iranian government and the mullahs responsible for what's happened, we have to have that level of irrefutable proof. We don't want to do anything less, because we want to not be the lead in this thing, but be the ones that put together this international coalition. Iran is attacking the world's oil supply, not just U.S.
Why would Iran do something so foolish, though? If you think about it, even working through its agents, whether the Houthi rebels or these other groups, knowing full well we've got an armada already there, we can just wipe them out at a moment's notice if it ever came to that. Why would they risk that wrath? They don't have too many friends in the region supporting them.
Well, two things. One, I think they want to just ratchet it up, and it's going to raise the price of oil, which means they're going to get more money in their coffers for the little bit of oil that they are getting out of their country and being used around the world. But the second thing is, it's very bizarre that they would pull something like this off while Prime Minister Abe is there visiting with the Supreme Leader Khamenei. I mean, it just does not make sense. So there may be a little bit of internal machinations going on within the Iranian government itself between hardliners and others.
But what about someone trying to set them up, Commander? That's what I'm getting at here. I'm not saying that's the case, but if you want to, trigger a battle with Iran, that's a good way to do it.
I think that right now, trying to figure out if we've got a false flag, I don't believe it. I think the Iranians, in fact, are behind this. We probably have the intelligence to back that. Clearly, Secretary Pompeo, as well as Acting Secretary of Defense Shanahan, believe it. And at this point, we need to get that intelligence to a point where we can declassify it, share it with the American people first, then with the world, so that we can understand the threat that Iran represents to the world's oil supply and the energy flow that comes in and out of that region.
Thank you, Commander. Good catching up with you, even under these weird circumstances. Kirk Lippold, the former USS Cole Commander. Oil prices were spiking on word of these attacks. They get back some of the gains, but you know the drill. When people are getting concerned about, some conflagration in the Middle East, this is what happens. To market watcher Scott Martin and what he makes of this. Scott, what next?
Probably higher prices, Neil, until you discussed, as it was, about figuring out what really happened here and what Iran, let's say, or whoever's behind this is after and what they're doing. Because let's face it, Neil, we saw markets bid up oil prices pretty precipitously today. They came off a bit towards the end of the day, of course, but that's going to influence prices of the pump because demand, let's face it, with the economy doing so well, is up since Memorial Day weekend year over year. We have a lot of folks flying this summer as well. That's going to drive up cost, of course, and seeing as how we have things unsettled, let's say, in the Strait of Hormuz, that's probably going to push up price too.
We also have the ongoing escalation of protests in Hong Kong. If you're looking for stuff that will rattle markets, typically the commodity markets like oil and all that, you have plenty of ammunition, don't you?
You do, and you also have the fact that we have seasonality at play here, my friend, and we've got this very tasty summer blend now of gasoline out there for the summer driving season, just in time for us to spend a little bit more on the pump. So to me, it's one of those things that are many factors going on. You mentioned Hong Kong. Also, we have G20 coming up. Sure. A lot of uncertainty out there that's pushing around the commodity prices right behind me.
There's always been a tug of war on, oil and all of that because the supply and demand equation still looks kind of iffy for oil advancing much further because of fears of a global slowdown, trade getting in the way, the Federal Reserve being accommodative, I guess, if things hit the fan, that it's going to put a lid on energy prices. What do you think?
There's probably a lid, but the lid is probably higher. I mean, we're probably only, say, 3/4 of the way up in the glass, so to speak, or in the container, because as we've seen, it's gone up before, Neil, on these fears. And yes, I agree with you. The good news is the Permian Basin is now, yes, my friends, the world's largest oil producer, so that's good. But we still have millions of barrels of oil per day tied to the Strait of Hormuz. So if there's any instability there, that obviously is pushing up price. And you know as well as I do, markets react first, and ask questions later. And that's what we're seeing happen right now.
All right, interest rates are still surprisingly low in this environment. It's not getting people overly rattled. I guess that depends on if there's an escalation, right?
Yeah, it does. But I'll tell you, interest rates being this low for so long and continuing to go lower is a little bit of a concern. The bond market, in my opinion, still, even though they may be a little bit wrong this time, is still the smartest money out there. They're telling us something. That's not just rates here also, my friends. It's rates overseas where we have negative rates in many developed countries now. We may be heading that way as well, at least towards lower levels.
All right. Thank you, my friend, very, very much. Scott Martin, following these developments, also want to give you a quick look at what's happening in the East Room of the White House.